Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today with everybody at the University of Washington. I'm on the other coast, so it's a little later in the day for me. But honestly, I wish I was actually with you all in Washington State, especially during the springtime and during our allergy season. I'm here to kick off this Privacy Week conversation, which is going to be a great day and a great opportunity to talk about kind of privacy in libraries, privacy on our college campuses, and beyond. And I am going to start by kind of centering our discussion around what actually vendors and the companies we work with on campuses. I don't want to say what they're doing that concern us, but just kind of some of the ways that they've changed and what that means for our privacy on campuses. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 30 minutes to make sure that I do not take away from our much more exciting panel discussion, where we'll get to talk to law students who have been involved in efforts around what I'm about to describe, and also law librarians and others who are grappling with the issues on the school side. So I'm just going to kind of set the table by giving us some information before we dive into that discussion. And to that end, I'm going to share my screen. Every conversation I ever have on Zoom starts with this. So here is me sharing the screen, setting the slideshow to play from the start. All right. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about what it means for privacy on campuses when our library vendors and other vendors are data analytics companies. So in order for us to talk about that, first I have to define like what a data analytics company is, what that means, why I think it's important for privacy. And also then we'll open up the discussion to what it means for privacy in our libraries, on our campuses, and even beyond that. So as I said, this is going to be kind of just a factual layout of the data landscape in our campuses. So you may have noticed that, I mean, since you came up through the education system, depending on where you are in it, campuses have become kind of more datafied, more digitized. And in doing so, we work a lot more with third-party tech vendors, right? We work with like registrar services. We work with test services like Proctorio. In libraries, we work with a lot of services that provide like research platforms, checkout and cataloging systems. So our campuses are more and more becoming kind of tech partnerships with these third-party vendors. And a lot of those vendors are beginning to describe themselves as data analytics companies. So first, let's look at what data analytics means. What does it mean when your research platform or your test proctoring system calls itself a data analytics company? So data analytics is the pursuit of extracting meaning from raw data using computer systems. So raw data and information are two different things. Raw data is just the little bits of kind of digital ephemera that we leave about us as we're searching online, little points of data about us. So my first name, Sarah, is a bit of data. My last name, Lambden, is a different bit of data. The school that I work at, CUNY School of Law, that's a bit of data. The school's address is a bit of data, right? And all of those things are raw data that are related to me, but they don't say much on their own, right? So information is the process of structuring data and creating more usable and more informative stuff out of our data. So if you take all of my data bits and combine them, then suddenly you know my name, Sarah Lambden, you know that I work in Long Island City. You can connect me to other people who work in Long Island City or other people with the same name as me. And it becomes a lot more usable, right? So that's the difference between data and information. What data analytics does is it goes a step further. It takes data, it takes information, and it runs it through machine learning systems, artificial intelligence systems, just algorithms, and it structures the data and it makes more meaning. It transforms the data to make predictions. Who's more likely to commit a crime, who might be a fraud risk, who or you could go, where is somebody likely to be at a certain point of time? When is traffic likely to be worse on a certain road, right? It can make predictions and prescriptions. It can tell people what to do. You should invest in this stock. You should track this person because they are associated with people who are likely to commit crimes, right? So it can make predictions and prescriptions. And that's really kind of at the heart of what our data analytics companies do. And this includes the data analytics companies that work in our schools and that we partner with in our schools. So here are some of the ways that companies that we partner with describe themselves and what they do. And you might be surprised to find that these self descriptions are different than what we imagine these companies, how we would imagine these companies describe themselves. So Reed Elsevier LexisNexis is a major journal company, Elsevier, right? You've probably read an Elsevier journal if you've ever had to do a report for a class, or if you went through any sort of academic program that involved research and writing. You probably used an Elsevier journal at some point. They're the biggest academic journal company in the world. And the other part of that, Lexis, if you're a law student, or if you're a lawyer, or if you work in a law library, you use Lexis's law platform, their legal information platform, to do legal research. So when I know, before I got into all of this research myself, when I thought of relics, I thought, oh, these are research companies, right? They're academic and other research companies. But the way they describe themselves is a provider of information-based analytics and decision tools for professional and business customers, enabling them to make better decisions, get better results, and be more productive. It doesn't talk about research or journals or case law or any of the things that I think of when I think of relics. Similarly, Clarivate, which owns ProQuest, which is like the system that makes our libraries run for the most part, most libraries in the United States. When I think of ProQuest and Clarivate, I think of indexes, being able to find different journals that I'm looking for, being able to check things out from a library. That's not how Clarivate describes itself. It describes itself as a global leader providing trusted insights and analytics. As somebody who likes to visit libraries and works at libraries, that also is a surprise to me, right? Similarly, Westlaw, here's kind of one of the front pages of how Westlaw, which is the major, one of the major legal research platforms, describes itself. It describes itself as a purveyor of something called litigation analytics. So it sells actionable data to improve lawyer strategies, right? And a lot of us, especially as law students and law librarians, don't think of the company that way. We think of it as where we would go to get a law review article or some case law, or to, see if a statute is still good law, or if it's, been superseded, what have you. So it also is a data analytics company along with its parent company, Thomson Reuters. Similarly, Bloomberg, which is a financial research and data information company, describes its data as changing the world, right? So this is just a few examples of products that you might use in your school's library that are actually data analytics companies. And I don't have like the description of how Proctorio or Interfolio or other like companies that we use describe themselves, but they also are parts of data analytics companies, especially like Interfolio, which just got purchased by Relic. So if you're applying for an academic job somewhere, or you are a grant recipient who has to report back about your grant, you're using Relics to do that now as well. So this is a data analytics company, makes predictions and prescriptions out of information and raw data. And all of these companies describe themselves as data analytics companies. So why have our academic vendors and our research vendors become analytics companies? There are a lot of complicated reasons for that, involving profit and kind of the future of information and what hot informational markets, there are. But the short answer is because all companies, in a sense, have become data analytics companies. Our thermometers have become digitally connected companies that that compile data to predict where a flu outbreak might be happening or where COVID is spreading, right? Our car takes our data and reports to insurance companies about how we're driving. So our car is a data, is part of a data analytics enterprise. Our home technology and our home appliances, like our refrigerators, our thermostats, our doorbells, they're all part of the data analytics system too, because now they're all connected to the internet, collect data about us. And that data is used by law enforcement, that data is used by advertisers. So they're also part of data analytics companies. Even our clothing, right? Beyond our watches, like for athletic shirts and other types of shirts and outfits, like that, those types of apparel are also becoming kind of data collection points and part of data analytics companies. So our whole world is kind of starting to become, conduits and vectors for data collection, which is all used for data analytics. It's just becoming very kind of ubiquitous and everywhere in our lives. So what does this have to do with University of Washington libraries, and what does it have to do with our privacy? The next slide is how I got involved in trying to answer this question. It turns out that some of the data analytics business that a lot of our companies are involved with is data analytics data analytics focused on predictive policing and surveillance. And a lot of the products that these companies sell are being purchased by law enforcement agencies and immigration and customs enforcement. That's actually how I discovered the problem. In 2017, someone emailed me or sent me, somehow I got an article about how LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters were vying for contracts to help ICE build its extreme vetting program, which was very controversial, invasive surveillance program. And that's kind of how I first recognized that there might be a problem with like kind of the direction our research companies were going and our library vendors were going. But these are two news stories from the last 2 years that show that the problem has not diminished since 2017. If anything, the problem has progressed and become kind of a deeper connection between our library products and other products that we use in our university systems and law enforcement agencies' big data policing and big data surveillance programs. So just last week, Thomson Reuters released an announcement saying that it actually is going to have to do an in-depth human rights risk mitigation investigation within its company as a result of concerns that its ICE contracts might be opening them up to human rights related financial risks. So that happened just last week. And last year, LexisNexis actually announced that it signed I think it was $16.8 million contract with ICE to become one of ICE's primary data brokers, data analytics service providers. So that's why I think it's a concern. And this is what got me involved in the research that I've done and kind of the book that is coming from it, which is called Data Cartels, in which I compare these companies to other types of monopolistic cartels. And the reason I compare companies like Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis with big kind of monopolies that might be harming consumers is because data has become a very valuable commodity, and Thomson Reuters is acting a lot like monopolists. Thomson Reuters and Relics and other companies doing similar work are acting more like other monopolists that controlled really valuable commodities in the industrial era. So if we say that like what's happening now is informational capitalism or the information revolution where everything's going digital and everything's going online, we can compare some of the economic interests in some of the companies in this sphere to companies that caused problems during the industrial era. So in the industrial era, oil was the major commodity, the major kind of source of financial power in the marketplace. And Standard Oil became such a powerful, invasive monopoly in that like had its kind of octopus-like monopoly tentacles in so many different industries and even kind of in partnerships with the government, that antitrust law was created to break up Standard Oil and to prevent these kinds of monopolies. And today we have a few predominant information monopolies kind of rising to the surface. And I made a similar octopus. I'm not the artist that this cartoonist was, but if you picture our data companies as kind of modern day informational monopolies, you can see the tentacles of kind of some of our biggest data analytics companies reach into a lot of different information markets. So one data company, I'm going to use Relics as an example, not because they're especially harmful or especially bad, just because they're especially large and they're a good example. But Reed Elsevier LexisNexis has a duopoly in legal information platforms, right? They hold the only company that can compare to them as far as the amount of informational power they hold in like the legal information sector is Thomson Reuters. They own the lead academic journal company. So they have their tentacles in academic research, scientific research, humanities research. They have one of the largest government records, personal records, troves and industries in the nation. They're one of the lead government data brokers in the United States. They have a huge financial information business where they make risk products for insurance companies, for financial institutions, etc. And they also have one of the biggest news archives in the world, if not the largest. Nexus is a gigantic news archive. If any of you have ever done like debate or forensics, you know that you would go to LexisNexis to do all of your research because that they have such a huge amount of news information. And they also have partnerships and affiliations with some of the lead specialized news services like American Legal Media or American Law Media, et cetera. And similarly, Thomson Reuters has its own news agency in Reuters News. So companies like Relics, Thomson Reuters, et cetera, have a lot of informational power, and they are, for all intents and purposes, informational monopolies. It's really hard to identify if things are cartels, and I get into this in my book. So I'm not going to say that if whether or not they are cartels, but they engage in kind of monopolistic cartel-like behavior that I describe in greater detail in data cartels, which is a topic for a different time. But as far as data analytics does, or as far as like data analytics goes and what these companies claim to do, this is what these companies say they do. So this is actually from Clarivate's recent annual report. This is how they describe their business model. So at the bottom, they can sell all of these different things. At the very bottom of the pyramid, they can sell raw data assets, right? They can sell data dossiers to the government. They can sell data to anyone who wants it, but they can also structure that data, as you see in the two bars in the middle, and they can sell research platforms, right? Or indexes. That's what Clarivate sells. But like Thomson Reuters and Reed Elsevier LexisNexis sell research platforms where they organize raw data and information assets so that we can log on with a password and search, we can search and find what we're looking for and pull those things out and use them for our own work, whether it's legal work or scientific research, what have you. But where they're really working to grow their business and where the real value add is at the top of the pyramid, where they sell predictive analytics that predict what will happen. And they sell prescriptive analytics that tell their customers what to do, whether their customers are landlords, ICE, banks, insurance companies. They tell all those businesses and entities and public institutions what to do. And that's really where they're growing their business, right? That's really the data analytics part of their business. So here is the pyramid in much simpler terms. So the companies can sell data in a lot of different forms and formats and information, right? So at the bottom, they sell raw data. In the middle, they sell information as a service, which is research platforms, et cetera. And at the top, they sell their data analytics products, which are answers as a service. Now, data analytics aren't inherently bad. Like data analytics can be amazing. Big data can be really useful. Here are some examples of data analytics products, and some of them are actually really important and helpful for society. So like COVID-19 projections, those are data analytics, right? They predict where COVID is likely to swell up, what the future of the pandemic might look like. We all need to know that, right? In order to protect ourselves and our communities. Stock market predictions are really useful, and they actually help quell fear about uncertainties in the market because they can predict what will happen in the market. Um, Academic metrics, I think, I would argue they're a less useful type of metric, but that is one of the data analytics products that these companies sell. And predictive policing and other predictive products, which I actually think are negative and harmful for reasons that I'll describe in a minute. But those are also data analytics products. So these products are all they're all advertised as kind of these miraculous, amazing products. When I just did a Google image search for data analytics, this is one of the first images that comes up, right? And it looks cool. Like I want my world to look like this, right? It looks like this user is like, there's some sort of magic going on in the data air around her, and she can like identify, I'm imagining her fingers pointing at like the future of where a new pandemic might break out so that she can prevent it from happening, or something great is going on there, right? It looks miraculous, it looks very futuristic and cool, but the potential, what I have found is closer to the reality. It doesn't look as much like this. It looks more like this. It's more like data being squished through an extruder like Play-Doh or clay to make new data products that are different shapes. But it's not as sci-fi as all this or high tech as all of this. It's based, I mean, it's really faulty data being fed through algorithms, machine learning, whatever, that we can't see. These black box mysterious algorithms, we don't know how they work. Sometimes even Relics and the companies that run them don't quite know how they work because they happen so quickly, and there's so many different things happening inside of like the algorithm in such rapid speed. It's really hard to know whether the algorithm is correct, whether it contains biases. And we know for a fact, I'll show you in a few minutes, we know for a fact that the data sets are biased and inaccurate. So what you're doing is you're taking faulty, imperfect data and running it through algorithms, which there's so much research out there by people like Sophia Emoja-Noble, Ruha Benjamin, Virginia Eubanks. There are plenty of scholars out there doing critical work on algorithmic and data system biases, right? So we know that algorithms tend to be biased, and we know that the information sets are biased. So we can't see for sure what data is going into these products and how the algorithms look, because there's absolutely no transparency from these companies. These companies will not share their data sets or their algorithms with us to let us see them. But we can assume that if they're anything like algorithms and data systems other places in the world and in other sectors, that they are not perfect, and thus the results that they're putting out into the world are also imperfect. So one thing that I think is interesting is I tend to think of the data analytics products as kind of a Play-Doh fun factory. When Relics draws out what its own data analytics system looks like, it looks like an extruder. Like you have on the left-hand side, you have all the little bits of clay, all the little pieces. You have primary research, public records, proprietary data, news articles, structured records, unstructured records, right? And it's all being squeezed through this magical system with a bunch of like swirls in it, right? That are decreasing content volume. So they're streamlining the data somehow, increasing content quality. I don't know, things are happening. There's a picture of like a government building and a magnifying glass. We don't know what's happening in there. That's the data analytics system. But then it spits out entirely new data products for Relics to sell. And notice the products aren't very clearly described. They're kind of described in like entity resolution, link analysis, cluster analysis. I don't know exactly what they're clustering, what they're linking. And they don't describe it very clearly anywhere, because a lot of what they're doing involves our personal records and running our Lex IDs, which is our personal data dossiers, through these systems. And I think it's just really bad PR to say, hey, we're running your personal data through all these algorithms and we're selling them to all these new people, right? But the fact is that this new data analytics business gives Relics, gives Thomson Reuters, gives Clarivate a lot of new customers, right? So these companies aren't just selling research products anymore. They're not just like publishers. Some people call Elsevier a publisher, or they call Westlaw a publisher. They're not publishers. They don't even call themselves that anymore. They're data analytics companies. And we're not their only customers. Academics, libraries are not their only customers. Now they sell huge amounts of data product, whether it's raw data or structured data, whatever. They sell it like as a warehouse system. This is a picture of Costco that I use, but they sell personal data to, to police. They sell financial data to banks. They sell legal information to law firms. They sell potential tenant vetting information to landlords. They have a lot of new customers, and they do a whole different business than we are used to them doing. Those of us who've been I was a librarian for like decades before I started researching this. This is not how I learned these companies worked. Right. So I wanted to go over just a few of their new customers really quickly. So one of their customers, law enforcement agencies, hundreds and hundreds of local, state, federal law enforcement agencies, including immigrations and customs enforcement. They sell predictive policing products and data dossiers to these companies and products that like allow them to pool their data together in kind of third-party fusion centers. They sell all sorts of law enforcement data analytics products. They sell products to other government agencies like child welfare agencies, the IRS, the Postal Service, any agency that tracks people and has like an enforcement mechanism or is deciding who they should award benefits to or when they should cut people's benefits, right? Over 70% of local government and almost 80% of federal agencies use some form of LexisNexis Special Services, which are their personal data analytics products. Tenant screening companies use LexisNexis Risk Solutions. And this is actually a news article about how, because the data in these systems are full of error, they're not perfect. People oftentimes can't get housing because they get erroneously placed on like risk lists that say that they're eviction risks or they're non-payment risks, and they can't get apartments or housing. In this situation, LexisNexis has a big healthcare system, electronic records management, and electronic or personal data systems that it sells to healthcare systems. And the company claims that it's helping to fight the opioid crisis, which means it's labeling people as risk of opioid addiction and opioid abuse. And people are getting erroneously placed on those lists, and then they're unable to get pain care management and other types of healthcare interventions that they need. LexisNexis serves a lot of insurance companies and financial banking systems with personal data products. And because their data dossiers about us are not perfect, people sometimes cannot get insurance. Sometimes people can't log into their own bank accounts because their information gets conflated with somebody else's information who has a similar name to theirs, and they suddenly can't get into their own bank accounts. So when LexisNexis makes a mistake, you pay for it. That's the title of this Newsweek article. So why is this a problem, or maybe not ideal for us? And it's because these products that they sell to all of these new customers involve our data a lot, and we're not sure where exactly this data comes from. And yeah, I'll explain it to you really quickly because I see we're running out of time. So here are just a few of the things that LexisNexis says it does with our data. So first, it collects a ton of our data. And I'm using LexisNexis as the example just because they have better descriptions online. Thomson Reuters is no different. Clarivate is a little different for reasons I could get into if we had more time. But this is not the only vendor doing this. This is just a good example. So LexisNexis's data product, and so same with Thomson Reuters, has data from over 10,000 different sources about each of us, updated in real time. So it's constantly being updated. And they have billions and billions of records, over 37 billion public records at the time that this went online. So they use that data to link us together. They can update people like insurance companies, law enforcement agencies, whoever their customers are, if our data changes. So if I get a new job, or I move to a new address, or I get pulled over by the police and the police enters it into their data system, that can ping, that can notify anybody who buys their data. So it can notify my insurance company, my healthcare system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, immediately. They can ID people. So Thomson Reuters calls this process making the invisible visible. They can take people who are trying to remain anonymous online, like maybe people who don't want their identity to be known, or who have to remain kind of undercover and secretive. They can match enough data with little bits of your data to identify you, even if you don't want to be identified and you have no connection with social media, et cetera, et cetera. They can make geospatial maps of locations. They can make risk and heat lists. Who are the biggest who are the biggest crime risks, who are the biggest fraud risks, and they can make lists of people, rank us, sort us. And they can help law enforcement pool data together in huge pools where they can all share data, like post 9/11 fusion centers, but run by a private company, so not subject to government regulation. Yay, cool. And here, each of us has a Lex ID. They have over 283 million unique ones. If you've ever looked at a data system, there is something about you in the Lex ID system. Your Lex ID is more revealing than any other universal identifier about you. So your social security number is a universal identifier. It's a number that is associated with your name that different pieces of data can be kind of attached to, right? So LexisNexis is very, very robust. And it's used to identify you, connect you to other people, and then to do data analytics enhancements, so the mapping and all the other stuff. So the big question is, this is where I'm going to leave it before I open it up for conversation. Where in the academic system, if we are using Elsevier products all the time, and Lexis products all the time, and Thomson Reuters products all the time, and we're using Interfolio and Clarivate and bpress and SSRN, which are all part of the RELX complex, where is our data going? And the answer is it is not clear. On the legal research platform side, the companies have verbally claimed that they don't use our data in any of their other products. However, that's not what their privacy policies say. And they have not been willing to draft a written statement promising that library and other academic data that's collected on your campus will not be used now or in the future in other ways. So they won't make that promise as a public written pronouncement. And I have my suspicion as of why. I'll explain that in a second. But we do know that on the Science Direct side, there is surveillance embedded in Science Direct. There's something called Threat Metrics, which is a system that surveils us and collects our data as we move about online, and it looks for criminal threats. And ostensibly the reason that that's on a database like Science Direct is to prevent illegal downloads or et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is they're collecting data of every Science Direct user. They're not expunging that data, and we don't know what else it could be used for, right? And that's just a reminder. So when you log on to these companies' platforms, which you have to do if you want to use Lexis or Westlaw or Science Direct, et cetera, Interfolio, SSRN, bpress, you have to set up an account and you have to log in. They're collecting data about you the whole time you're on there. Whenever you're using a private platform and you have given identifying information about yourself, you are being tracked. That is part of the value add of having your login and having to use their platforms, right? So just keep that in mind. You are in their ecosystem and they are collecting data about you. And there's nothing in their privacy policies that say that they ever have to get rid of that data or expunge it. They can just keep it forever, which is what I think they're doing. And that is why I think that they're not willing to promise that they're never going to use our data. So our data has value. All dark data sets, even if they're not being used at the time, have potential value, right? If they can make the right data analytics system, they could monetize our data in new ways. So I think that they just hold on to our data until they can find a way to monetize it. And they don't want to promise that they're never going to monetize it, because if something valuable enough comes around, they will monetize it in new ways that they're not already using it, right? So one thing to keep in mind is that also the data companies are fickle. In 2019, after Lexis and Tom and Westlaw starting getting some heat for being involved with LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters that are, data brokers with ICE, LexisNexis sent this email out to every law faculty in the United States. And you'll notice the part and they put this in bold. This is just the email I got. They said, we are not providing jail booking data to ICE, and we are not helping to build their data infrastructure to assist in ICE's efforts, right? They said that to us in 2019. They were so earnest about it that they sent an email to every law faculty in the country. Fast forward 2 years to 2021. Now, LexisNexis has the biggest data brokering contract with ICE, even bigger than Thomson Reuters. So when you're working with profit-driven companies that say they're data analytics companies, they're going to use data for profit. That's just the nature of these companies. And now I think this is probably a good place to open it up to broader conversation and invite everybody else to participate.